Welcome to the program Power to Unite with Elvira. After a very hectic schedule during the Holy Week, so now we have another episode coming in, and we had a special guest coming all the way from the Holy See with a purpose. And I think the mission of the Filipino will be known all over the world because this is very important and this involves the youth. This is something that you have to look forward to, listen to, and this is none other than Msgr Thivierge. He is the Secretary General of the Pontifical Fondazione Gravissimum Educationis, who's created by His Holiness Pope Francis. So what is this all about? But before we go into that, we want to know, why did he become a priest? What inspired him, to be what he is today? And his greatest contribution was his passion for education, his love for the youth. So maybe, Msgr, maybe you can enlighten us. Who influenced you? Why did you choose to become a priest?
Thank you very much. This is a very central question in my personal evolution as a human being and also, of course, as a Christian and as a priest. I was born in a very nice family, I'm an only child.
Okay.
I'm an only child, and I spent all the first years of my life a very joyful and a very good, very pleasant context, very good family, loving parents. And of course, my parents were extremely, I would say, sensitive to the fact that I had to be well educated. That was a basic point in, I would say, my early life. So I was, as you can imagine, being an only child, I was a bit spoiled, but not capricious. The rules were very, very clear at my place. You have to organize your things, you have to take care of your room, even if there was personnel at the house. But they told me since I was very little, the personnel is not at your service. And also my parents were, I would say, very good Christians. For them, the prayer was important, the church was very important, charity organization and serving the community was very, very important. So which means that even when I was very young, I discovered that it was extremely important, to realize that I was living in a kind of a community that has its own needs, and at the same time, I was supposed to learn to discover the needs of the community, to be sensitive to what was going on, and then to see how I could serve the community. Education has always been very, very important. I was in a very good school run by the Christian Brothers, and it was, still that type of school where they educate the mind, they educate the heart, and also they teach you how to open your arms towards the others. I grew up, in a good ambience. Good ambience in the family and good ambience in the school. So these are the two important pillars, I would say, of my education. Family, good education, and also Christian values.
So it's a very holistic approach that molded your personality. I would like to know, Msgr Gabriel, what is the job of your parents?
My mother used to be a secretary, but she was not working outside. She was taking care of the house. My father was in the paper mill, so working in a big industry, very big industry.
At an early age, you already become a very responsible person. But the most important I notice is that, they emphasize, just like in the Philippines, most of the dreams of the parent is for you to finish your education, they emphasize on education. Now I understand why you are what you are today, you know.
Yeah, I was really at the very center, I would say, of their preoccupation and also the very center of their affection and their love. And my parents were very demanding in this respect. They were very demanding. I can tell you just a very simple story. One of my aunt was having a bigger family. There were 6, 7 children. And she loved me very much, and I did also love her very much. Once she came to our place, and she said, well, are you coming to our place? They were living in another city. Are you going to spend a couple of weeks with your cousins and at our place during the month of July? Oh, I said, yes, Aunt Simone. Oh, yes, I will go. Very good. And when, at the end of June, beginning of July, so my parents came back on the topic, and my father said, so when have you decided to go to your cousins, your aunt, your uncle? Oh, I said, I think I don't want to go. My father took me apart very nicely, very close to him, I remember that, and he said, listen, who promised your aunt and your cousins that you were going to go and spend time with them during the summer? Because they are very happy to have you. You promised that you go, so you have to stay behind your promise, and you have to go. No more discussion. You have to go. So this is very formative. At that time, it was not very easy to understand all the implications of that, because there are many implications. But since then, you know, I started to understand that you have to stay behind your word. If you say something of importance, of course, but if you say something, stay behind your word. If you promise something, stay behind your promise.
When you decided to become a priest, what is the reaction of your dad? Because he could say, why not be trained as an executive, finish your education as, you know, in the business world, you know. What is his reaction? Because you're the only son.
You know, I was really not sure for a while. I said, well, maybe I should become a lawyer or something like that, you know. Yeah. I thought of that very much. And when I came after that, at 18, 19 years old, no, the idea of the vocation was very strong.
So very strong. We will talk about it, you know, sa pagbabalik po ng Power Tonight with Elvira. Msgr, you know, your life story is very interesting, you know, and as I listen to you, I'm learning so much because, you know, you have seen how the influence of your parents molded you as a person, full of love, full of discipline, you know, and also understanding. And I was asking you a while ago, what is the reaction of your dad? But then you said, okay, I will tell you a story about how this vocation came into your life. That at the age of, you know, typical young ones, you change your mind. You want to become doctor, you become a lawyer, you know, considering your father is a professional, you know. So I'm not surprised if you suddenly wanted to be, you know, a businessman or to become a doctor. But something, the Holy Spirit works in you. Maybe you can continue how you fell in love and how the Holy Spirit works in your life.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, I was also studying for the classical studies and also philosophy. I would like to highlight something up to my words, determining, I would say, in my vocation and determining in my life as a human being. I met very good professor, very, very good professor. So when I was finishing my classical studies and then entering into philosophy, because I studied philosophy also, I have met a couple of priests that really, they were my professors first. They were just fantastic professors. One was in literature, another one was in philosophy. And, you know, I was very impressed by the way they were, I would say, working with us, the way they were educating us, the way they were transmitting knowledge, science. But, you know, the type and the quality of human beings, you know, that they really represented for me. And I would say through these professors came back to my mind the idea of becoming a priest, of the vocation. I said, well, I think that I could be a person like this. I could be a person, and I should. And every day it became more and more evident that it was my way, you know. Well, it's not nothing automatic, but, you know, reflection, prayer, context, living with other students, Catholic activities and all that, you know, all that together became became really a kind of a source, multiple sources of my discernment, I would say, of my vocation. So I see that you're very interested about the reaction of my parents. Okay, so it was exactly at Christmas time. It was at Christmas time, and I was not talking very much about my, I would say, discernment, because I thought it was something personal with also my spiritual director. And I was not talking too much in family about that. So, but at a certain point I said, well, now I was finishing my philosophy, so it was really time, you know, to make well, anyway, the final decision was already made, but I had now to finalize with my parents. I had to tell them. And this was very, very interesting. I thank you for asking me that, because it was such a beautiful moment, and you will see the reaction of my parents. We were the three of us, because I'm an only child. I was sitting there, my father was sitting there, and my mother was there. So it was, I think, 26th or 27th of December, 65.
How
So
old were you at that time?
Well,
18?
I was about 20, 21.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. So during the lunchtime. So I told them, okay, I decided, I think that God is really, really giving me a great vocation, and is the one to become his priest, not his priest. So what happened was absolutely fantastic. Both of them were looking at me. Mm-hmm. My father put his hand on my mother's hand. He looked at me and he said, "Your choice will always be ours." This is, from an anthropological point of view, this is the basic of the construction of a personality and also of a vocation. In a few words, your choice will always be ours. The verb is at the future, which means no matter what will happen, because you will start, you will see, you will continue to discern, and then you will see. It is, in other words, it is your decision. It's not ours. We have, I think so, they have created the right conditions for that, but I mean, they knew that it was my own decision. Your choice will always be ours. I had to make a very important discernment because I was very interested in education. But when you become a priest, first and foremost, you become a priest. And you do not decide exactly what you will be asked to do as a priest. So that is the reason why, for a while, I was a kind of ambivalent between becoming a diocesan priest or a Dominican. A Dominican, because I have always been very interested in intellectual life, and being a Dominican was a way to be most probably in the field of education, teaching, and this was really my profound desire. So now you can ask me, why did you go to the Dominicans? The reason why is the Dominicans, they are the predicators, they are teaching, you know. And to me, I was really fascinated by that. But at the moment of the discernment, you know, it was not very easy. That was not very easy for various reasons. My education, it was an education to absolute freedom and responsibility. That was really in my DNA, very profoundly. My parents always gave me freedom, always. But you're free, but be responsible. So finally, I decided with the help of my spiritual director, I decided that my real path was the one of the secular clergy. But, you know, it's very easy to say in a few words, but when you go through the processes, it takes time and it's difficult and you suffer. You suffer because, you know, choosing is at the same time rejecting. You choose something and you abandon a lot of things.
The choice to be with the religious community is not very easy because you will be constrained.
Absolutely.
And when you are constrained, it's not you anymore.
Absolutely.
Because you grew up in a very free, you know, and I think that's the reason why you choose the right one. But we will continue your love story, you know, with your vocation sa pagbabalik po ng Power to Unite with Elvira. Msgr Gary, you know, it's very interesting using the influence of the family is very important. The education, the environment you brought up, you know, will really, how do you call that, motivate you to become what you are as a person.
Absolutely, absolutely, because, you know, you don't go through a process or processes like this and always in the great facility. You know, you have battles, you have deceptions, your ideal might be very high, and you have to learn how to shape it in a concrete way for today's world. I would say my great chance, when I started theology, I had always been fond of my studies. I was always a good student, and I loved studying. So the period, my first 4 years of theology, I was so happy. I was very happy because, you know, intellectual life was also part of my DNA. So intellectually, I was growing. At the same time, theology was a kind of an ingredient also to grow personally and spiritually also. And the environment of the seminary. So something special happened during my studies of theology. Mm-hmm. I was studying in a smaller city, medium-sized city, the first 2 years of theology. And then it has been decided, together with my bishop, that maybe I should continue in a big university, because the bishop wanted to prepare me for future studies with the right degrees.
Okay.
So after 2 years, close to my city, very close, so I was sent to Quebec City at Laval University, studying theology, but on the campus of a huge university, very international, all faculties, and very, very important university. So it was quite different from the first 2 years of theology, because I was in a kind of a seminary. We were living together, and even my parents were not even permitted to come and visit me every week. At that time, that's the way it was. And they were telling me after that, my mother told me, well, once in a while with your father, we were driving around the seminary, just maybe we are going to see him, because for them it was very difficult. It was also, I have imposed my parents very big sacrifices, very, very big sacrifices. So then I went to Quebec City, and at the Faculty of Theology of Laval University. When my father accompanied me, I remember that exactly the moment. So we were arriving there. I had my luggages and everything. So I was sitting next to my father, and he put his head on mine. He put his hand on mine. He said, "If it is not your choice, if you change your mind, make sure that the doors of our house is always open." So this is extremely important. This is fundamental. So I was there again. I finished my theology, and I was ordained. And I had been ordained for 52 years. I was ordained in 70. So I had the great chance to study right at the end of the Council, the Vatican II. So a lot of changing were going on, new documents, for instance, on the theology of revelation, and very big changes, new orientations. So that was extremely, I would say, exciting. For me, intellectually, it was exciting and rewarding also to be in that type of context, So I was lucky, because I was seeing some of my colleagues. They were not really in love with their studies. They were studying because they had to study to become a priest. No, I was studying first and foremost because I loved to study and I wanted to be a priest. But the depression was very much also on the quality of the studies. And very humbly, I must confess that I have been very distinguished as a good student. So that is the reason why, when I finished all that and I was ordained, the university where I was, the faculty really wanted to have me as a young professor, as an assistant professor. Yes. So I said, well, talk with my bishop, And the bishop accepted, but he said, okay, it's very important. He must have a kind of a pastoral experience at the same time. So this is the moment where I started as an assistant professor at the university in dogmatic theology with a very good master. And then I was the chaplain of the community of the Christian brothers. So once again, I was coming across the Christian brothers, their spirituality, and I was living with them. I was not the one who was going to say Mass there. I was living with them. So it was a kind of another major seminary, because I had to be extremely at the service of them with a real discipline, Mass at 6 o'clock in the morning, predication every day, hearing confessions at 5:30 or 5:45. For a young priest, and I was only 24 24 years old. I was 24 years old. For those who would like to count, now I am 77. So, you know, it has been a kind of a continuity in my formation. So I did that for 2 years, and then I was sent to Paris. I was sent to Paris for various studies at the Sorbonne, also my doctorate in theology and all that. So I was in Paris for quite a few years, also very happy. And then they decided, okay, given that you're very interested in anthropology and the biblical anthropology, after my doctorate, I was sent to Rome to the Biblicum to study, of course, biblical studies. So I studied for many years. And I started, in fact, when I was in Rome, I started as a young professor at the Lateran University. So they said, well, no, we would like to have you. Why don't you come here? I said, well, see with my bishop. See with my, I'm not my own boss, you know. So see with my bishop exactly what he's going to tell you. And given that there was an important need in Rome, so he said, why don't you try at the beginning to do half and half? So for 5 years, I was part-time in Rome and part-time in Quebec. But it was difficult. It was difficult because being part-time, you know, you're full-time everywhere. So it becomes extremely exhausting. So after a while, the discernment was to remain in Rome. So I remained in Rome, and then I have been in Rome for many years. And after that, the director of my university in Rome finished, and he became director of the research center of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. And when he finished as the director of that center, he really wanted me to become his successor. And this is when I entered, I would say, in the world of all the Catholic universities of the world. So I started as assistant director, I became director, and then Secretary General of the Federation, and I had been there for 30 years of my life.
So that is
30 years. All my life at the service of higher education. All my life.
So we will come back with another episode. So I hope you will continue to follow us next week here at Power to Unite with Elvira.